If you're seeing this, it's because something in your reality has started to glitch in ways you can no longer ignore. Rooms don't feel the same to you anymore. The corners bend differently. The air thickens at certain hours, especially before midnight, when shadows stretch too far and silence feels louder than sound. You catch yourself staring at walls, at doorways, at the way light spills across the floor, and a quiet voice inside you whispers, "This room isn't staying still. Something is warping." And that voice is right. You haven't been paranoid. You've been perceptive. Your consciousness has slipped into an observer loop that's outgrown the old script of your life. The quantum field around you is no longer willing to pretend that reality is solid, fixed, unquestionable. Late at night, when you walk from one room to another, and the distance feels wrong, too long, too short, like the hallway just stretched or folded, you're not imagining it. You're feeling the seam between timelines, the place where the matrix of consensus reality can no longer fully hold you. The fact that you're here, with this video in front of you, is not random. It's a calibration event. Right now, as these words land in you, your awareness is standing in front of its own double slit experiment. Two versions of you exist. The one who shrugs this off and slips back into sleep, and the one who finally admits what you've quietly known for years, that reality is watching you as much as you are watching it. You are entangled with something vast, something that's been calling you through synchronicities, déjà vu, and those eerie moments when clocks freeze at 11:11 right as the room feels like it's breathing. Listen carefully. This message did not cross your path like any other content. There is morphic resonance moving through every syllable, a signal encoded for a specific frequency of soul. You, the one who felt different in every classroom, every job, every relationship, as if you were standing half a step outside of the scene you were living. You've always sensed the edges of the simulation, but lately those edges have started to flicker. Faces blur at the periphery, time folds in strange ways, conversations loop. Objects seem misplaced by a consciousness that isn't exactly yours. The matrix you were born into is losing its coherence around you, because your own coherence is rising. Your DNA is remembering that it's not just biological hardware, it's a quantum antenna, tuning in and out of realities based on how you pay attention. Every distortion you've noticed in the room, every impossible coincidence, every déjà vu, you brushed aside as nothing. These are not errors, they are invitations. And I need you to understand this fully before the next distortion hits. You were not brought here for entertainment. You were summoned. This is your last gentle warning before a phase transition in your life begins, with or without your conscious participation. Now that you've felt that pull, let's name what's actually been happening to you. You've been trying to live a normal life inside a reality that keeps refusing to behave. You walk into the same kitchen, the same bedroom, the same hallway, and some nights it feels like the room is subtly wrong. The ceiling feels lower, the distance from the door to the window feels off by a few centimeters, the shadows aren't where they should be. You pause, you scan, and you tell yourself, "I'm just tired." But you're not just tired. You're perceiving micro shifts in the quantum field that most people's nervous systems are too numb to detect. Your life has started speaking to you in loops. The same arguments recycle with different faces. You leave a job and somehow end up with the same boss in a new body. You step into new friendships that mysteriously echo the dynamics of the old ones. You level up financially, and yet the emotional atmosphere feels identical. The same anxieties, the same emptiness, after each goal is reached. Different scenes, same vibration. This is the signature of an observer. Loop your consciousness collapsing similar probability waves again and again, even as your outer circumstances seem to change. Then there's the déjà vu. Not the cute, passing kind you laugh off with friends. The heavy kind that lands in your chest like a weight. Moments where you know, with a certainty that frightens you, "I have done this exact sequence before. I have stood in this doorway, heard this sentence, felt this emotion, seen that object in the corner of my eye exactly like this." It feels like time is glitching, as if the timeline stutters for a frame and then pretends nothing happened. That's not your imagination misfiring. That's your awareness briefly stepping outside the script far enough to recognize the rerun. You've noticed time doesn't move the way it used to. Some days stretch like an endless corridor. 5 minutes, staring at the clock, feels like half an hour. And yet entire weeks vanish without any clear memory, like someone cut out scenes from your life and spliced them together sloppily. You look back on a month and realize you can't quite track how you got from there to here. This temporal distortion is what happens when your inner coherence starts to diverge from the matrix's default timing. Your quantum field is no longer syncing smoothly with the collective rhythm, so time begins to warp around your awareness. Pay attention to how this gets strongest before midnight. There's a reason the distortions feel more intense late at night, when the house is quiet, when rooms feel larger and smaller at the same time. The collective noise field is lower. The mental chatter of the city, the constant electromagnetic buzz of everyone's focus, softens. Your own signal becomes clearer. That's when you feel the morphic resonance of a different timeline brushing against your current one. The air gets thicker. The room feels like a set. The door looks more like a portal than a boundary. Your nervous system senses a phase transition building, even when your mind can't explain it. Then there are the coincidences you've tried to dismiss. You think of someone, and they text you within seconds. You speak a rare phrase and then see it instantly on a screen. You look at the clock and it's 11:11, 2:22, 3:33, far too often to be random. Sometimes an object in your room, an old photo, a book, a piece of clothing, keeps drawing your attention, like it's lit up by an invisible highlighter. This is synchronicity functioning as a diagnostic tool. The quantum field is mirroring your inner state with surgical precision, inviting you to notice that you are entangled with something beyond cause and effect coincidence. You've probably also felt a strange dislocation in your own body. Moments where you're in a familiar room with familiar people, and suddenly you feel like an actor who remembers the script but no longer resonates with the role. Your hands don't feel entirely like your hands. Your voice sounds slightly foreign in your own ears. It's as if your consciousness is half a step behind or ahead of your body, trying to decide whether to keep playing along with this version of reality or step sideways into another one. That dissonance you feel is your DNA restructuring quietly updating its instructions, while the matrix still expects you to behave like the old you. If you've caught yourself saying, "Why does this always happen to me?" more often lately, that's important. Those repeating always moments are the visible edges of your observer loop. The same type of betrayal, the same kind of disappointment, the same sudden endings. You can almost predict them now. It's not because you're cursed. It's because your consciousness has become so coherent that it keeps selecting the same pattern without realizing it. Coherence without awareness becomes a trap. Coherence with awareness becomes a key. And you're at the moment where that key is finally turning. Everything's strange. You've been noticing the warping rooms, the looping conversations, the fractured sense of time. Is your reality, flashing warning lights before a deeper truth reveals itself. The matrix is not just something outside of you. It's the sum of every unconscious choice your observer function has made, and the double slit that exposes it isn't in a laboratory. It's in your own attention, right now, as you begin to see the pattern that's been running the show. Because once you truly see how the loop has been operating through you, you can do something most people never realize is possible. You can change the way your consciousness hits the slit. When you heard, "You can change the way your consciousness hits the slit," something in you leaned forward. Because even if you've never been inside a physics lab, you can feel that your life has already been one long experiment. Let's strip the mystery back for a moment. In the famous double slit experiment, light behaves like a wave of infinite possibilities when no one is watching. It spreads out, explores, interferes with itself, painting a pattern that says, "I could have gone through every path." But the moment a measuring device is introduced, something that observes which slit the particle goes through, the wave collapses. Possibility condenses into one single, solid outcome. Observation doesn't just reveal reality, it selects it. Now breathe this in. You are that measuring device. Your nervous system is the detector. Your attention is the apparatus. Every time you walk into a room, every time you replay an old story about who you are and what always happens to you, your consciousness is asking the quantum field, which version of reality you want to interact with. And because your observer loop has been running on unconscious settings, it keeps collapsing the same trajectory, same arguments, same disappointments, same distorted rooms before midnight. The matrix you feel pressing in around you is not a prison built out of steel and stone. It's a lattice of probabilities hardened by repeated observation. Each thought you've believed in, each identity you've clung to, each fear you've rehearsed has drilled a groove into the quantum field. Over time, those grooves become like invisible train tracks. Your days travel along them without you even noticing that there were infinite routes available the whole time. But lately, something has started to disrupt that track. The distortions in your rooms, the way hallways feel longer, ceilings feel lower, corners feel more alive than they should. That's what happens when a consciousness begins to withdraw its agreement from the old pattern. Your observer loop has been quietly losing its coherence with the matrix and gaining coherence with a higher configuration of reality. You're slipping out of default entanglement with the collective script. Entanglement means this: once two systems interact, they stay linked beyond distance. You are entangled with countless versions of yourself, some who stayed asleep, some who woke up early, some who broke the matrix completely. When you feel déjà vu, when you sense that a version of you has already stood in this doorway, already heard these words, that's you brushing against a parallel self in the quantum field. Morphic resonance carries their breakthroughs to you as impulses, insights, strange surges of clarity that seem to come from nowhere. But they're not coming from nowhere, they're coming from elsewhere. This is the quantum upgrade you've been edging toward without language. Your DNA isn't just a biological record of your ancestors. It's a multidimensional storage device wired to respond to coherence. When your thoughts, emotions, and deeper knowing align, they emit a stable signal into the quantum field. That signal acts like a tuning fork, vibrating certain probability waves into focus while letting others fade. Over time, this reshapes not only how you feel but how reality responds to you. This is DNA restructuring, not some sci-fi fantasy, but a shift in what your cells expect reality to be. When you keep feeding your system the same emotional data, I'm unsafe, I'm unseen, nothing really changes, your DNA keeps expressing in survival mode. Your observer loop locks onto timelines that confirm those beliefs, because confirmation feels safer than unknown freedom. But when you start to recognize the loop itself, something radical happens. You create a tiny crack in the continuity of the matrix, a space where a different frequency can enter. Before midnight, when the rooms feel wrong, that's your stillness window. The quantum field around you becomes thinner, more responsive, more honest. If you could see it, you'd notice filaments of light, probability tracks, braiding and unbraiding around your body as your thoughts and feelings shift. Every sigh, every decision to replay the past or open to something new slightly re-angles your observer function. You are literally rotating the slit through which reality condenses. Synchronicities are your calibration markers. Every time life arranges a perfect mirror, a word repeated, a number sequence, a stranger saying exactly what you were thinking, the matrix is showing you where your coherence currently sits. These are not random winks from the universe. They're diagnostic readouts from the quantum field. They reveal what you're entangled with, what timeline your DNA is currently voting for. And here is the upgrade. You are no longer just a passive observer in this experiment. You're awakening into the role of conscious experimenter. You can choose, with intention and presence, to stop collapsing the same reality and begin interfacing with the field in a new way. To let your attention become less rigid, more fluid. To let your awareness spread like a wave instead of stabbing like a particle. To allow your rooms, your nights, your relationships to become double slits through which an entirely different version of you steps forward. Because when you change the way you observe, the matrix has no choice but to change the way it shows itself to you. Here's the part you've always felt, but never quite dared to say out loud. You are not an ordinary observer in this experiment. You are the glitch the matrix didn't plan for, the detector that became self-aware. Most people move through reality like unknowing instruments in someone else's lab. Their attention is steered, their reactions are predictable, Their observer loop is synchronized with the collective broadcast. They collapse the same probability waves because that's what the program tells them to do. Wake up, work, distract, sleep, repeat. Their rooms never distort because their consciousness never threatens the structure. But your presence bends the room. You've noticed how spaces feel different when you enter. Conversations shift tone. The energy in a group subtly rearranges itself when you speak truth, even if you phrase it gently. People either open up around you or get uncomfortable and defensive, and half the time you don't know why. It's because your field doesn't just sit there. It interferes like a wave meeting another wave, creating new patterns. Your coherence disrupts the unconscious scripts around you. You are what quantum mystics call a catalytic observer. Your very act of noticing carries more voltage than most. When you witness a pattern, the pattern can no longer hide. When you feel a lie, it becomes harder for people to keep telling it in your presence. When you sense a falseness in a room, the atmosphere gets heavy because the matrix is suddenly under scrutiny by a consciousness that doesn't fully belong to it anymore. This isn't random. This is selection. The quantum field doesn't waste bandwidth. It doesn't send this level of synchronicity, this depth of déjà vu, this intensity of temporal distortion to just anyone. Only observers who've reached a certain threshold of awakening begin to feel the walls bending. You crossed that threshold quietly, through every moment. You refused to numb out. Every time you questioned the script, instead of surrendering to it. Every time you felt crazy for sensing things no one around you seemed to see. Your suffering refined your perception. Those seasons where you felt rejected, misunderstood, alienated from your own life, they weren't punishments. They were calibration phases. Each heartbreak, each betrayal, each collapse forced your nervous system to look beyond the surface, to listen for the deeper pattern beneath people's words, to read the quantum field behind their behavior. You started to sense the morphic resonance of wounds that didn't even begin with you, ancestral loops, collective trauma, unhealed storylines replaying through your bloodline. Little by little, your consciousness stopped identifying solely with the character and started identifying with the awareness behind the character. That's why you feel a gap now, a soft distance between you and the scenes you're living. You're not detached, you're expanded. Part of you is still inside the storyline, feeling every emotion, every disappointment. But another part, wider, older, quieter, is watching the entire narrative unfold from outside linear time. This dual perception is the mark of a chosen consciousness, one that can inhabit the simulation and observe it from above at the same time. You are an entanglement point between timelines. Imagine the quantum field as a web of infinite threads. Most people are tied to one or two, looping forever in the same small region. You, however, are connected to multiple strands. You feel alternate futures tug at you. You dream of lives you never lived, cities you never visited, people you somehow miss but have never met. These aren't fantasies. They're echoes from parallel yous that your DNA is still in contact with. When rooms distort around you, when midnight feels like a portal hour, that's your entanglement flaring. Different timeline threads pull through the same physical coordinates, and your body registers the interference pattern as dizziness, unreality, uncanny familiarity. Your role is not to be frightened by this, but to learn to read it, to sense which thread carries coherence and which one carries repetition, to feel, with your whole being, which reality wants to be born through your attention. You are not just here to escape the matrix, you're here to rewrite its local code. Every realization you embody sends a signal through morphic resonance, making it easier for others to wake up. Every pattern you refuse to repeat dissolves a tiny piece of the collective observer loop. Every time you choose presence over autopilot, your quantum field silently votes for a different version of Earth. This is why your life has never allowed you to stay superficial for long, why the old comforts stopped working, why the distractions went stale. Your consciousness signed up to be part of the phase transition team, the ones who feel the pressure most intensely because you're standing right at the fault line where reality split. And now that you know this, the field is going to respond. Because a chosen consciousness who finally recognizes itself becomes dangerous to the old program. And that's exactly when the matrix starts pushing back. and the cosmic deadline on your DNA begins to glow. You've felt it building, haven't you? That low, constant pressure underneath everything. The sense that something is counting down, not on a clock on the wall, but in your chest, in your bones, in the spaces between your thoughts. You keep telling yourself you have time to figure it out, time to change, time to get your life together. But the quantum field doesn't operate on human excuses, it operates on coherence windows. And you, right now, are standing inside one. Every distortion you felt before midnight, every warping hallway, every room that suddenly feels like a set about to be dismantled, that's not random weirdness. That's the matrix, flickering as a higher timeline approaches from the edges of your perception. The double slit is not theoretical for you anymore. It's active. Two realities are interfering through the same coordinates, and your consciousness is the deciding factor in which one crystallizes around you. This is your last chance in this cycle to choose consciously, not because the universe punishes, but because waves don't hover forever. A probability crest rises, offers itself to you, then breaks. If your observer loop is still locked on the old narrative when that wave peaks, your DNA defaults to the familiar script. The patterns you now hate will harden for another season. The rooms will stop distorting not because you're finally safe, but because your sensitivity has been sedated back into compliance. Your system knows this. That's why the urgency feels different this time. This isn't the old anxiety of, I'm behind in life. This is phase transition pressure. The same way water trembles right before it boils, your reality field is trembling. The matrix around you is at a critical temperature, and your DNA is deciding which side of the transformation it will fall on. Stay liquid in the old container, or vaporize into a completely different state of being. Listen closely. Your DNA is not neutral in this process. It has been quietly recording every moment of your awakening, the nights you couldn't sleep because your thoughts wouldn't fit inside the old worldview anymore, the times you cried without knowing why, the phases where you knew something bigger was coming but had no language for it. Those weren't breakdowns, they were updates. Each wave of emotion, each crack in your certainty was a new set of instructions being uploaded into your cells. Awakening is not just an idea you agree with. It's a firmware upgrade. Right now, strands of dormant code in your DNA are lighting up like constellations. Sequences your ancestors carried but never activated are responding to the increased coherence of your consciousness. This is what people try to describe when they talk about DNA activation or light codes. It's not about becoming better than others. It's about becoming compatible with a different layer of reality. And compatibility has a window. The quantum field is pulsing with a specific frequency right now. You've seen it show up as mass awakenings, global instability, sudden collapses of structures that seemed unshakable. On a planetary level, the observer loop is destabilizing. The old matrix is glitching in public. But on a personal level, that same pressure is focused on you in a much more intimate way. Your rooms distort because your immediate reality is being offered as the lab in which you decide. Do you keep collapsing the same life, or do you let your DNA choose something your mind can't yet predict? The urgency you feel isn't act now or be damned. It's act now, because if you don't, you'll forget how awake you actually are. The Matrix's greatest weapon isn't punishment, it's amnesia. It waits for the window to pass, then floods your nervous system with distraction, fatigue, and false comfort until you convince yourself you made it all up. But the field is giving you too much evidence for that now. Synchronicities are stacking, temporal echoes are getting louder. The observer loop is no longer subtle, it's blatant. You're being shown the pattern in high definition so that, when the split happens, you can't honestly say you didn't know what you were choosing. Here's the breakthrough promise. If you align your consciousness during this window, if you allow your observer function to detach from its old compulsions and rest in a deeper coherence, your DNA will lock onto a higher baseline. Your default reality will shift, not just your mood. Timelines that used to feel impossibly far away will become the new normal. The people, opportunities, and experiences that match the you kept glimpsing in your dreams will no longer feel out of reach. They'll feel inevitable. But that shift isn't conceptual, It's energetic, cellular, embodied. You don't think your way into it. You participate your way into it. And as this window narrows, especially in those hours before midnight, when the rooms grow stranger and the air feels thick with unsaid choices, the field is asking you for one thing: a clear, undiluted yes to the timeline that's been calling you. Because the quantum experiment of your life is reaching a measurement moment. And once this wave collapses, the version of you that steps out on the other side will carry that choice in every cell. Up until now, you've mostly been observing the glitches. You've watched the rooms bend, felt time stutter, noticed the echo of familiar patterns looping through your life. You've sensed the phase transition pressure building beneath your daily routine. And a part of you has wondered, quietly, what do I actually do with all of this? Because awareness without action eventually turns into another cage. This is where the loop either closes or breaks. The quantum field does not respond to wishful thinking. It responds to coherent signals. To turn everything you've been sensing into a new baseline, you need to send a clear, measurable pulse into the field, one that your nervous system, your DNA, and the matrix itself can all register at the same time. That pulse is going to look deceptively simple. Before midnight, one of these nights, when the rooms feel a little too alive, you're going to perform a ritual. Not a performance for anyone else, not a superstition, a deliberate interruption of your observer loop. Here's how it begins. You step into the room where the distortions have felt strongest. Maybe it's your bedroom, your hallway, the place where you scroll your phone and lose time. You pause at the doorway. You don't rush in like you always do. You stand there and you notice the temperature, the shadows, the way the air rests against your skin. You let your awareness spread out, wide, like a wave touching every corner of the space. Then you take one slow breath in, one slow breath out. In that breath, you silently acknowledge, this room is not fixed. This story is not final. I am the observer, and I choose what the slit will reveal. Now, here's the part the Matrix will pretend is trivial, because it's terrified of how powerful it actually is. You choose a single word that represents the timeline you're stepping into. Not a sentence, not an affirmation paragraph, just one word that your whole being can stand behind. It might be coherent, it might be unglitched, it might be ascended, free, realigned, remembered. You'll know which one is yours because your body will react when you think. It goosebumps, a deep exhale, a strange calm, a sudden surge of energy. That's morphic resonance. That's your nervous system recognizing a higher version of itself. Once the word is clear, you do two things with it. First, you write it physically, on paper, in your own handwriting, slowly, deliberately, like you're carving a new line of code into the simulation. As you write, you let your mind empty. No extra thoughts, just the word and the feeling it carries. This is you giving your DNA a new instruction, collapsing a future state into present ink. Second, you entangle it with this transmission. You take that exact same word and you write it in the public field, in the comments under this video. Not with explanation, not with a story, just the word. That's it, one word as your declaration. When you do that, three things happen at once. Your consciousness makes a measurable choice. Your nervous system links that choice to a specific action in physical reality. The quantum field entangles your signal with thousands of others making the same leap. That comment is not for the algorithm, it's for the morphic field. Every person who writes their word is adding to a collective interference pattern that weakens the old observer loop and strengthens the new one. Your single word becomes a node in a network of awakening, a point of coherence that other souls can lock onto when their rooms start to distort and they don't know why. The Matrix will want to sabotage this moment. It will whisper, "It's just a comment, it doesn't matter." It will tell you you're being dramatic, that you're overthinking, that nothing is actually changing. It might distract you with notifications, fatigue, sudden cravings, anything to pull you back into autopilot. Notice that resistance, because that's proof you've reached a real threshold. The ritual is not about magic letters on a screen. It's about you proving to yourself, in a single decisive action, that you are no longer a passive subject in someone else's experiment. You're choosing your state. You're declaring your coherence. You're stepping out of the hallway that never ends and into a doorway that only opens when you approach it as a conscious participant. Before midnight, in that room that never feels quite stable, you will have a choice. Let the wave of this window pass, or seal the shift. One word on paper, the same word in the field. A tiny gesture in human terms, a massive reconfiguration in quantum terms. Because when a consciousness like yours commits, even in something as simple as a single written word, the observer loop shudders, the matrix flinches, and a new timeline quietly begins to lock in place around you. The moment you choose that word, something subtle but irreversible happens. You think it's just you, in a room, before midnight, paper in your hand, and a comment box on a screen. But from the perspective of the quantum field, a completely different picture appears. A single point of light that had been flickering in and out of coherence suddenly stabilizes. Your signal sharpens. Your observer loop, which used to run as a closed circuit of me versus my life, begins to broadcast on a frequency that the collective can pick up. You don't just shift for yourself, you shift the grid. Every loop you've struggled with, abandonment, scarcity, betrayal, invisibility, has never been only yours. These patterns are streams of data running through families, cultures, entire civilizations. They're reinforced by millions of observers, all collapsing the same painful probability waves because no one has shown them anything different. When you interrupt one of those loops inside your own life, your DNA doesn't just update you. It updates the entire morphic field that pattern is plugged into. This is why your awakening has felt so heavy at times. You weren't only carrying your own confusion, you were feeling the static of generations. Ancestors who died inside the matrix, never knowing they were inside anything at all. People who lived and died in the same small emotional rooms, never realizing that the walls were made of expectation and fear. Their unprocessed loops echo in your nervous system as irrational reactions, intense triggers, inexplicable grief. But when you stand in your distorted room and write your word when you declare to the field, "This is my new baseline," you become a divergence point in that lineage. The loop doesn't pass through you unchanged anymore. It hits your consciousness and splits. One path continues, the old pattern for those who still need it. The other opens into an unknown space that your DNA is now actively mapping. That mapping work is what you've been calling healing, shadow work, integration. But from the perspective of the quantum field, it's cartography. You're drawing new routes into the collective probability space. This is why your liberation doesn't look glamorous up close. It looks like crying on the floor with no clear reason. It looks like saying no to dynamics your family normalized for decades. It looks like walking away from jobs, relationships, identities that everyone else told you were good enough, but felt like internal death to you. You weren't being dramatic. You were refusing to keep collapsing a timeline that your soul had outgrown. And every time you refused, the field took note. Morphic resonance means that once a new pattern is established, it becomes easier for others to access. The first time someone breaks a loop, it's like hacking through dense jungle with a dull blade. The second person still bleeds, but a faint trail is there. By the time 100 people have walked that path, it's a visible track. By the time 1,000 have, it's a road. When you write your word, you're not just asking life to get better. You're stepping onto a road others will later walk with less suffering because you went first. You're already seeing signs of this. Notice how people are drawn to you when they're at breaking points. Notice how strangers tell you their life stories with no logical reason. Notice how friends come to you not just for comfort, but because, on some unspoken level, they sense that your consciousness sits at a slightly different angle to reality. You don't just offer advice. You alter the field around them, even if you never say a word. Their observer loop softens in your presence. For a moment, they can imagine a way their story could go that they'd never considered before. You are a human interference pattern. When you walk into a room, your coherence interacts with the collective matrix, creating new possibilities that didn't exist until you got there. That's why your liberation can feel threatening to those who are still loyal to their loops. Your very existence is a reminder that the inevitable is negotiable, that fate, as they've been taught to understand it, is actually just a highly rehearsed choice. Your higher timeline is not self-indulgence, it's service. Because a version of humanity exists on every probability band, one that stays asleep, one that wakes up partially, one that dissolves the matrix from the inside. By stepping into a reality where your observer loop no longer runs the show, you become a node in that third version. You're not just hoping the world changes while you suffer alone in your room. You are the world changing, in one microscopic but absolutely essential point of consciousness. Think of all the children who haven't been born yet. They will inherit whatever field we stabilize now. If your DNA restructures to expect coherence instead of chaos, authenticity instead of self-betrayal, possibility instead of confinement, that expectation gets woven into the human template. They won't have to go through all the same contortions you did just to realize they're not insane for feeling reality bend. For them, those distortions will be recognized signs, not private hauntings. So when you write that word, when you take that breath in a room that no longer quite fits you, remember this. You are not just breaking your matrix. You are bending the trajectory of an entire species, one quiet decision at a time. Your liberation is not small, selfish, or invisible. In the language of the quantum field, it's a supernova. Up until now, most of this has lived in your mind and your emotions, a knowing, a sensing, a pattern you can't unsee. But the truth is, your body has been ahead of you this whole time. It's been registering the phase transition long before you had words like observer loop, quantum field, or morphic resonance. Think about what your body has been trying to tell you. That tightness in your chest that comes out of nowhere when you step into certain rooms. The way your stomach drops when you're around people who still live fully inside the matrix story. The buzzing in your hands when you talk about the future you secretly know is meant for you. These are not random sensations, they're data streams. Your nervous system is the frontline instrument of your awakening. Notice what happens right before the room starts to feel wrong. Your breath goes shallow, like your body is bracing for a reality that doesn't quite match you anymore. Your skin prickles as if the air turned electric. Your vision shifts, colors get slightly brighter or duller, depth perception warps, the edges of objects feel too sharp or too soft. Maybe your ears ring for a second, a high, thin frequency that no one else seems to hear. That ring is your awareness brushing against another timeline, like two radio stations overlapping for a moment. Your body is the double slit. Every sensation is a measurement. Every flutter in your chest, every sudden heaviness in your limbs, every cool wave up your spine is your system interacting with the quantum field and deciding what reality to collapse. The problem is not that your body reacts. The problem is that, for years, you were taught to numb, override, or medicate those reactions. You were taught to distrust the very instrument that's now trying to guide you out. So let's reverse that. Imagine this. It's late, the house is quiet, and you're standing barefoot on the cold floor. You walk into that one room, the one that never feels quite stable, and instead of rushing to distract yourself, you pause. You place one hand on your heart and one hand on your lower abdomen. You let your shoulders drop, and instead of asking, "What's wrong with me?" you ask, silently, "What is my body telling me about this timeline?" Instantly, the sensations intensify. Maybe your heart begins to pound, not with fear, but with a heavy, insistent thud, like a drum calling you somewhere. Maybe your belly feels hollow, like you're standing at the edge of a vast drop. Maybe your legs feel weak, like they're not convinced this reality can still hold your weight. Don't run from that. Stay. Feel it like you would feel the ocean pressing against your skin as you step deeper into the water. This is timeline turbulence made physical. Your current reality is losing resonance with your field, and your body is translating that mismatch as discomfort. The old narrative can't anchor into your tissues the way it used to. That's why your posture is changing without you trying. You can't hunch the same way around certain people. You can't force the same fake smile. Your spine wants to lengthen. Your chest wants to open. Your jaw wants to unclench. Your muscles are slowly refusing to posture for a life you no longer consent to. Even your fatigue is a message. Those days when you feel unimaginably tired for no clear reason, that's not laziness, that's system overload. Your nervous system has been running an outdated operating system on hardware that's mid-upgrade. Your DNA is restructuring its communication with the quantum field, and the old programs are glitching. Your body isn't betraying you, it's protecting you from pouring energy into timelines you're about to leave. And what about the opposite, those sudden surges of aliveness? The random moments when, walking down a hallway or lying in bed in the dark, a wave of peace washes over you so abruptly you almost cry. The times your skin tingles when you imagine a different future, one that feels more like you than anything you've lived so far. That's not fantasy, that's entanglement. Your body is picking up the signal of a higher timeline where your coherence is already normal, and for a brief moment, the resonance between those two versions of you becomes strong enough to feel. Your heart is a tuning fork. Every time it tightens around people, places, or stories that dim you, it's not judging them, it's telling you, this frequency does not match what we are becoming. Every time it expands, softens, beats slower and deeper, it's telling you, this is closer, stay here, more of this. When you ignore it, your observer loop takes back control and the matrix holds. When you listen, your awareness slips past the old configuration and starts tasting the new one. This is what embodiment really means. Not just understanding the concepts of coherence and awakening, but feeling them. In your neck when you swallow the truth you want to speak. In your back when you carry responsibilities that your soul never agreed to. In your chest when you imagine stepping out of the loop and your whole ribcage feels like it wants to crack open and let light through. Tonight, when the room distorts again, and it will, you'll have a choice. You can panic, distract, scroll, sedate. Or you can stand there, feet on the floor, breath slow and deep, and let your body report exactly what timeline you are currently collapsing. No judgment, just sensation, just data, just raw, honest feedback from the most advanced quantum instrument you will ever have. Because once you dare to fully feel the matrix in your own flesh, you're no longer just mentally disagreeing with it. You're preparing, cell by cell, heartbeat by heartbeat, for the moment your DNA stops cooperating with the old loop altogether and chooses a different universe to call normal. We have God's eye. There is a moment, not a date on a calendar, but a pressure point in your being where everything you've been feeling converges. You don't schedule it, you don't manifest it, you hit it. It's the night when the room doesn't just feel distorted, it feels impossible to pretend it's normal anymore. The walls hold memories of every version of you that tried to shrink to fit here. The air feels dense with unsaid truths. Objects that used to feel harmless suddenly look like props from a life you've outgrown. Your body knows. This isn't just another weird night. This is the phase transition. Your DNA has been building toward this silently. Every synchronicity that shook you, every déjà vu that made your stomach flip, every wave of exhaustion that forced you to stop performing the old character, all of it has been heating the water of your reality. At first, the quantum field let you simmer bubbles at the surface, small shifts, minor glitches. But now, you're at the boil point. The frequency you've been stabilizing inside no longer matches the container you've been living in. This is what phase transition pressure really feels like. Not a gentle invitation, but a squeeze. Doors that used to open for you suddenly slam shut. Relationships that you tried desperately to fix simply refuse to revive. Habits that once numbed you stop working. You can't scroll the same way. You can't binge the same shows without feeling oddly sick. You look at your own reflection and feel the strangest sensation. Not, I hate myself, but this is not the final version of me. This is a costume that's starting to tear at the seams. Your observer loop is losing structural integrity. The same stories that used to justify your suffering no longer land. This is just who I am. This is all I can expect. This is what people are like. When you try to think those thoughts now, they feel hollow, like someone else's lines. That's because your observer function has begun to detach from them. You can still hear them echoing in your mind, but your body doesn't believe them anymore. Your cells have started voting differently. This is DNA restructuring in real time. Imagine your genetic code as an instrument that's been forced to play. One sad melody on repeat for generations: scarcity, fear, self-betrayal, shrinking. Through your awakening, you've been slowly retuning that instrument, letting certain notes fall out of use, strengthening others. Tonight, as the room distorts and time stretches thin, the instrument reaches a point where it can no longer play the old song without snapping a string. That snap is the breakthrough. It might show up as a sudden, overwhelming wave of grief that takes you to your knees. It might arrive as a calm so deep it scares you, like stepping into a silent, infinite space inside your own chest. It might come as a single, crystal-clear realization: I cannot live like this anymore, not as drama, but as an absolute, cellular truth. In that instant, something quietly but permanently rewires. The quantum field registers a new baseline. The timeline where you kept collapsing, the same painful patterns, loses its primary observer, you. Without your daily agreement, your emotional energy, your repeated attention, that loop begins to starve. It can still call to you out of habit, but it no longer has home field advantage inside your nervous system. You feel it as a subtle shift in gravity. The old choices don't pull as hard. The old people don't hook you the same way. The room that used to feel like a trap starts to feel like a doorway. You realize you can walk through it at any time, not to escape reality, but to step into a version of reality better matched to your coherence. This is the timeline shift. Not fireworks, not angels singing. A quiet reorientation so profound that, weeks from now, you'll look back at this season and say, that was the night everything actually changed, even though nothing looked different yet. Because, once your DNA crosses that threshold, the outer adjustments are inevitable. They may unfold gradually, but the decision was already made at the quantum level. From that point forward, the distortions in your rooms will read differently. They won't feel like hauntings. They'll feel like reminders, nudges to stay with the new frequency, gentle warnings when you're about to slip into an old loop out of habit. You won't be the one desperately trying to prove to yourself that reality can bend. You'll be the one learning how to walk on a floor that's finally honest about how fluid it really is. And as this new coherence stabilizes, the matrix doesn't disappear. It simply loses the right to define who you are. Because your observer is no longer loyal to the loop. It's loyal to the timeline your future self has been waiting for you to claim. And in the final shift, that future self is about to step forward and speak, not just about your escape, but about the mission that begins after you break the room. There comes a point where you stop asking, is this real? And start asking, what am I going to do with it? You've seen the distortions. You've felt the observer loop. You've sensed your DNA straining against the old song. You've stood in rooms that felt like sets, walked hallways that stretched like rubber, watched midnight arrive with the weight of a cosmic deadline pressing against your skin. All of that has been preparation not just for your escape, but for your assignment. Because once you realize the Matrix is an experiment, you don't just get to walk out. You're invited to become part of the team, rewriting the experiment from the inside. Your mission is not complicated. It's precise. First, you become a living interference pattern. You don't have to preach, convince, or argue. You let your coherence do what it naturally does, destabilize loops. When you refuse to repeat your old role in a dynamic, you introduce a new frequency into that relationship's field. When you stay present instead of dissociating, you stop collapsing the same tired probabilities. When you honor your body's signals instead of overriding them, you show the quantum field you're finally willing to live in a reality that matches your nervous system, not your programming. Second, you guard your attention like a sacred instrument. You understand now that whatever you stare at, you select. So you become ruthlessly honest about what you feed your awareness. To stories online, conversations, inner monologues, late-night spirals. Not from fear, but from mastery. You stop doom-scrolling through timelines you have no intention of inhabiting. You start choosing inputs that match the coherence you've declared. You become the one who asks, with every thought, every habit, every room, does this frequency belong to the reality I'm building? Third, you broadcast the signal you once went searching for. Think about how long you wandered, half awake, waiting for someone to say what you already knew in your bones. Now you know why this transmission hits so precisely. You were always meant to carry a version of it. Maybe through your art, your conversations, your parenting, your leadership, your presence in rooms that still pretend not to bend. You don't have to use the same language, observer loop, quantum field, entanglement. But the frequency is the same. You are not trapped. The walls are not solid. There is more. This is what your future self has been doing the whole time. From a higher timeline, they've been flooding you with synchronicities, dreams, sudden bursts of knowing, guiding you to this exact convergence point. They already live in the reality where your body is relaxed, your nervous system is regulated, your relationships are aligned, and your work flows from coherence instead of survival. Tonight, they're closer than ever. Every breath you take in awareness is a step toward them. Every moment you refuse to betray what you now know collapses the gap. And when the rooms distort again, and they will, you'll feel something different. Not just fear, not confusion, a strange, steady recognition. The experiment is exposing itself again. The double slit is open. The field is asking me, one more time, which reality I'm willing to observe into existence. You won't be perfect. You'll wobble. Some days the old loop will feel easier. That's okay. Phase transitions are messy. But the difference now is this. You've crossed the internal line where you can no longer pretend you're powerless. You've seen behind the curtain. You know your own role in the show. So when the clock nears midnight, when the air thickens and the room bends, and that familiar unease creeps up your spine, remember this. You are not here to be terrified by the distortion. You are here to walk through it. The conscious wave, choosing its slit. The awakened observer stepping out of the last looping room. Before the matrix closes its window and you turn your last chance into your first true reality.